8:50 exactly, and an interview that I've been waiting to get my teeth into, and that, of course, is with Sheena Swemmer. She is at Wits University, and sorry, I just seem to be having a bit of technical problems here. Sheena Swemmer currently works at the School of Law, Center for Applied Legal Studies at Wits, obviously. She does research on the intersection of violence against vulnerable groups and rights in the Bill of Rights. Her current focus is sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual violence in schools, LGBTI rights in South Africa, and importantly as well, animal rights in South Africa. She's here to talk to us about a war against women that is being waged in the shadows, and that is obstetric violence, something not very many people are aware of, not very many people have paid attention to. I think it is something that is ignored, underreported, or possibly even not believed when the stories are narrated to other people. So, Sheena, you're going to unpack this to us, very especially in the 16 days of activism against GBV. A very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you. I should imagine this is something, as all of your activism work, very close to your heart, but very little is known about this obstetric violence. Unpack it for us, please.
Yeah, so you're entirely right that it's a section of violence or a part of violence that is almost entirely unacknowledged. So obstetric violence is quite a complex word for something that really means violence against pregnant individuals, pregnant women, before, during, or after giving birth. And this violence can include physical, sexual abuse, and mistreatment, as well as disrespect of individuals' rights, verbal assault, psychological and emotional assault. And this takes place, surprisingly enough, or maybe not surprisingly for some people, in our hospitals, and the perpetrators are our healthcare practitioners.
Okay, with due respect to the very dedicated and good, amazing doctors, nurses, and midwives that we do have in our system, there are the rotten apples as well. And these rotten apples are the ones that are perpetrating these abuses. You talked about sexual violence, and I can't even seem to get my mind around sexual violence by a healthcare professional towards a probably highly pregnant woman.
I mean, I think the way to look at this is that public violence and private violence against women occurs almost anywhere. So when we think about high rates of rape, high rates of child abuse, it lends very similarly to other places in our society, in our schools, in our healthcare facilities, in our workplaces. So there is the emergence of these types of things: sexual harassment, physical violence, sexual assault, non-consensual touching. It shouldn't be surprising, although it is. But wherever we have women, almost so to speak, we have the violation of women.
Now, the Minister of Police released crime stats a little while ago, a couple of days ago rather, and what was glaring for me when I was preparing for this interview was that nothing was reported on obstetric violence. The coverage of stories related to gender-based violence during this period, and also the president has described GBV as war, which is waged on women's bodies. In many instances, probably by their own partners, but this is in a public space. This is a service provider, a hospital. And I'm also wondering, Sheena, does this happen in private institutions, private hospitals where you pay an arm and a leg for treatment, or is this just being picked up a lot in state hospitals?
Okay, so yeah, with regards to this stat, you're entirely right. There's no real acknowledgement of the term obstetric violence in our law. So at this point in time, we wouldn't see or wouldn't be likely to see any kind of stats around it. And it's an entirely unacknowledged form of violence. With regards to where this violence is happening, it's happening in both your private and your public sphere. So, for example, an organization which assists women who have been violated called Embrace, they had speakers on last night that were speaking about the atrocities of being in a private hospital. So it's prevalent in both spheres, although it does have intersections and is extremely prevalent in your public spaces. And that's because of also things like your limitation of resources and lack of capacity of staff members. But we do see it occurring in both spheres.
Okay, the big question then, the ultimate question is, how do you report it? Is it reportable? What's going to be done about it? Because as it is, GBV issues seem not to be taken seriously enough by SAPS. So I'm going to share something with you now, respond to it, and then let's talk about, is this a reportable crime, if we can label it as such? Let's unpack all of that. Now, we understand that, and these were stories shared by the different organizations. They say that nurses use their fingernails and fingers to tear open mothers' vaginas. Women are being refused pain medication despite numerous requests. This is in the hospital setting, obviously. Being sent out in that very highly pregnant state of theirs to purchase their own medical supplies while in active labor. Having procedures performed on them, such as sterilizations, without their consent, having their personal medical information, such as their HIV status, discussed openly within their ward, as well as being admonished by healthcare practitioners for having a child when being HIV positive, or having a child when you can't afford to feed an additional mouth.
Yeah. So these are some of the very prevalent,
shocking,
prevalent and shocking that is occurring. And then when you say, is it reportable? So you're going to be quite disappointed in this one. Is it only reportable if it constitutes a crime? And in our country at this point in time, it would have to at least be the equivalent of assault. So things like refusing painkillers, making you go and buy your own medication, that wouldn't amount to a crime presently in our country. The only thing that might constitute a crime is the tearing open of the vagina with your nail. If the nurses sometimes hit the woman's legs and tell them to open their legs, that might constitute a crime. But a lot of the very disrespectful and rights-limiting kind of treatment is not a crime in our country at this point.
So 2 questions here, Sheena. Obviously, it's going to be my word against yours. I'm going to have to prove that this is what happened to me in the hospital. And if that nurse has got a whole lot of support from the other medical staff on hand, I'm going to be voiceless. But let's assume I do have a strong enough case. Let's assume I've recorded something. If it's not a reportable crime, whom do I go to for support, and what can I expect in the form of support?
Okay, so there are other avenues, and that is things like the Health Professions Council of South Africa. That's where you can report doctors, or you can report nurses to the Nursing Council. They can take disciplinary steps against these individuals. Although it's an expensive route, you also have the option of pursuing a medical negligence claim. But what I've said with that is it also has a very high threshold of, you usually, to get a reasonable monetary compensation, you have to have quite a physical violation. Our law is very behind on any kind of acknowledgement of emotional and psychological trauma. So that's another route that individuals have. Groups like CALS, where I'm from, and Embrace, we're really pushing for proper policy and law to open up these kinds of spaces so there is a recourse, because at the point in time, the two avenues I think are really inadequate.
Okay, my final question then. Here we're talking about war against women by the medical fraternity. I should imagine that a lot of abuse is targeted at pregnant women by their spouses, by their partners, to the point where they possibly even lose the babies. How different is that scenario? Does the woman have more legal recourse in that situation?
Yeah, so you'll find studies actually find heightened rates of violence against pregnant women, so intimate partner violence. I would say that there is better recourse, at least in terms of what's on the books. You have things like the Domestic Violence Act, we have the Sexual Offences Act. The only issue with that form of violence, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot during these 16 days, is that it's very difficult for individuals to often report spouses and partners for violating them. So I definitely think there's more legal acknowledgement of intimate partner violence, and it is heightened during pregnancy. But I think it's very similar in ways that you feel the pressure, like you said, how do I go against all these nurses and doctors? There's also the same kind of thing in how do I go against my husband or my partner, especially if he's supporting me. So it's another pocket of silence, but it's better recognized in our law.
In closing, what is the positive message you want to leave with vulnerable women listening into us and kind of saying, gosh, I didn't realize that, what was the way I was being treated was really a form of violence, and to be more aware going forward. What's the very strong message you want to give to women who have been abused in similar circumstances and support structures?
Yeah, so I would definitely say, you know when something, the way someone has treated you, it feels wrong, and it feels wrong inside, and often is what you feel or have felt when giving birth and you were violated in some way. I'd say definitely reach out to friends, because it's actually very prevalent, and you'll find other individuals who have experienced this, but also reach out to groups such as Embrace. You can also contact COLS, which is where I'm from, for more information. There are groups emerging that want to take this further and are there to support and also to lobby government to get changes and get acknowledgement around this. This is the beginning of a revolution around obstetric violence. So please reach out. And if you felt something was wrong, it probably was. I can definitely end on that.
Sheena, thank you so very much for spotlighting on this shadowy world of obstetric violence. May you go well. May the organizations putting their weight behind this grow from strength to strength. Let us support our mothers and our daughters through this time of theirs, which should be a time of celebration, and then they're being treated so very badly. God bless. Thank you indeed for your time.
Thank you so much.
It is exactly 9:04. That was attorney Sheena Swemmer talking obstetric violence. And for more information and a deeper understanding on these issues, please just Google them. If you don't have the number, I don't have it offhand, but you can call the studio and we'll gladly share those details with you. Stay with us. We're going for an ad break, and when we get back, we'll be taking the news and financial updates with Nafisa Saider.
Breaking stereotypes.